GamingBolt presents 15 times you fought against sequential bosses. Bosses sometimes come in pairs, but we don't mean ganging up on the player. Sometimes you'll take down one towering foe only to discover that another one cowers behind them. Here are 15 times you fight sequential bosses. Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Raise followed by a battle with SOLIDUS Snake. Raiden goes through a lot of tough battles in Metal Gear Solid 2, but the toughest is certainly the wave of Metal Gear Raise that appear out of nowhere to attack the hero at the end of the game, weakening him for his confrontation with the conniving SOLIDUS Snake. And what a finale it is as Raiden finally gets his revenge on SOLIDUS, who killed his parents. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Calamity Ganon followed by Dark Beast Ganon. Calamity Ganon isn't the true form of the dastardly villain, it's just a phantom that has taken the evil overlord's form. The true enemy reveals himself after Calamity Ganon falls. Dark Beast Ganon rears his ugly head and forces Link to deftly dodge blows and seal the evil entity once and for all. Skies of Arcadia, the final 3 bosses. Skies of Arcadia is a long game. The end has a strong boss, like you might expect, but it manages to draw out this final encounter by adding 2 extra bosses to the proceedings. It's most annoying because it's right at the end of the game, and the extra challenge makes it almost impossible to actually see the game's ending. Super Mario RPG. You fight Smithy, and then a stronger version of Smithy. Smithy is a strong boss, but instead of simply defeating him and moving on, the game gives him a bit of a power-up and sends him at you a couple more times. It's still the same enemy, he's just way stronger than he was half of a minute ago, which makes defeating him much more difficult. Wild Arms 3, final boss takes 11 forms. Bosses taking on different forms is nothing new, but 11 might be a little bit of an overkill. By the time the double digits roll around, we're ready to call it quits, but then another form rears its head, and then another. It almost seems lazy at that point, but it certainly is memorable. Red Faction 2, Super Soldier and Mecha. This is a classic tactic in many games. First you fight a giant robot, and then the machine's pilot/super soldier exits their vehicle and brings the fight to you. In Red Faction 2, this exact series of events takes place. It's not very dramatic, but it is a fine fight that keeps the player on their guard. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Deathel takes 6 forms. This bulbous foe keeps Link on his toes. Starting out as a blob, he bounces around the screen before transitioning to a bipedal form, tossing energy balls about before finally ending up as a disgusting slug that writhes on the ground, trying to corner Link. Dark Souls, Ornstein and SMOUGH. Ornstein and SMOUGH quickly gained notoriety as 2 of the most difficult and entertaining bosses of the original Dark Souls. If you defeat one of them, you might breathe a sigh of relief, but you would be congratulating yourself a little too soon. When one falls, the other takes on their power and becomes an even more terrifying foe, making the second half of this fight even more troublesome than the first. Sonic 3, multiple fights against Robotnik. If nothing else, Robotnik is tenacious. At the end of the launch base zone, he once again rears his metallic head, piloting one of his strange machines, which is essentially a stationary drill that fires easy-to-dodge projectiles. Cause this machine to explode in pixelated flames, and you'll be greeted with 2 new fights against him. None are too tough to take down, but it does begin to wear thin. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Emperor Ing and Dark Samus. In Metroid Prime, the bosses have multiple phases, and it doesn't just sit still and let Samus fire off missiles and charge shots. You take on 3 forms of Emperor Ing, followed by a final battle against Dark Samus. This is a rather long sequence, but it's one hell of an experience to play through. Cave Story, Misery, the Big Bad Doctor, and Undead Core. To make your way to the Undead Core, which is the final boss of the fantastic Cave Story, you need to first take on Misery, the Big Bad Doctor, and then take on the climactic enemy and 2 of his goons. It's a long journey to the end, but thankfully these are some entertaining boss encounters. Pokemon Black and White. The Elite Four is always a challenge in any Pokemon game. You need to be well prepared and have a pretty good idea of what you're going up against. Only then can you hope to stand a chance against the world's strongest trainers with no breaks in between. Pokemon Black and White takes this to the extreme by integrating the Elite Four into the game's story, which means you also have to take on the bosses of Team Plasma, a legendary dragon, and then the final 2 bosses, In and Getsus. Final Fantasy XV, Astral Ifrit followed by Arden. Final bosses never just step out of the shadows ready for a fight. They always have to toy with you a bit first. Arden does this in a way befitting of the latest entry in the long-running Final Fantasy franchise. He enlists the help of Ifrit, the embodiment of fire. You need to take out the massive fire-wielding enemy before you can take on the villain himself, and it's quite the dramatic event. Dark Souls 3, the Nameless King. Before you can take on the king himself, you must first knock him off of his noble steed. This massive four-winged dragon is a sight to behold, its feathers rippling in the wind. Only after you bring it crashing to the ground can you take on his royal highness. It's a dramatic and evocative fight with plenty of visual flair on top of the expected difficulty. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Almost every boss in Twilight Princess has multiple phases. Link will get to work cutting down whatever stands in his way, only for the enemy to grow more powerful. Morpheal begins as a mass of tentacles, only to reveal himself to be a large aquatic beast capable of leveling stone columns and eating unsuspecting Hylians. Zant, on the other hand, is pretty much a series of unique boss fights, forcing the player to relive past encounters. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.